Just give us your take about Premier Lee's visit to Australia and what's been achieved.
Well, first of all, I think it's put the relationship back on a more normal footing. This is the first high-level visit from China in 7 years, and that's quite extraordinary. For 40 years before that, each year there were reciprocal high-level visits. Our Prime Minister went to China late last year, and now Li Qiang has come this year. So I think it's fair enough to say that the relationship's back on a normal track with annual high-level visits. Our Prime Minister described the visit as having refreshed and renewed the relationship after half a dozen or more years of great difficulty, and I think that's not a bad assessment of the visit.
The two nations really trying to increase economic cooperation, but one episode that went viral during this trip was Chinese officials trying to block journalist and former detainee Cheng Lei in a ceremony in Canberra. I wonder, how close can these two nations get when they clash on fundamental issues, ideology, human rights, even when the economic interests are there?
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I think no one wants to shy away from the major differences that divide Australia and China. But I mean, that's true with China and any other country in the West. And Australia has large differences with countries, say, like Vietnam, which also has a poor human rights record run by a one-party authoritarian communist state, just like China. The challenge for Australia is, as the global competition between the US and China intensifies, we're able to navigate between a very difficult space, being true to our values and interests, but at the same time, maintaining as good and productive relations as we can with China. Look, you know, I said we haven't had a high-level visit in 7 years. In that time, China has gone from 60% of US GDP to having a GDP equivalent to three-quarters, 75% of US GDP. We're living in the middle of one of the greatest power shifts that's ever occurred in human history.
And yet you do not want cooperation when it comes to sensitive industries like critical minerals. How big of a sore point will this become?
Well, I don't think it's a sore point if we are open and transparent about our policies. There are many sectors in China that are closed to foreign investment. And that's made clear, and it's the same with critical minerals in Australia. If we define critical minerals as being of strategic interest to Australia and of importance, then we need to be clear and upfront that they're not open to foreign investment. I think the main thing is that we do this in a transparent and non-discriminatory way.
We are now seeing Premier Lee in Malaysia trying to court smaller, more neutral nations. We have heard from Malaysia that they will actually be joining the BRICS economic bloc. Are we seeing a more polarized security environment? And as this progresses, how difficult will really the role, the position be for some of these nations like Australia?
Well, I think with Malaysia, it's very interesting news that's just come in. I'm just getting across it myself, but it doesn't surprise me because what we're seeing in this new multipolar world is a bifurcation into two major orders. There is a US Western-led order, which Australia unashamedly has placed itself in that group, and there is the Chinese-led order. And it's very interesting that Malaysia has decided to join the BRICS because this really is part of the institutional framework that China's put in place to give definition and structure to its order, along with the Belt and Road Initiative and the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank and so on.
And how do nations like Russia and North Korea play into that? Because we have Putin now visiting Pyongyang in what seems to be a potential realignment by Pyongyang towards Russia more than China even.
Yeah, I think you really put your finger on it. This is a three-party dance that's going on. And it's interesting that the North Korean leader visited Russia last year and met with Putin, and Putin's now made a return visit to Pyongyang this year. This is very much a lot of messaging about China as well as to the West. Sure, it's showing the West that Putin has other friends and other options. Sure, Putin needs Pyongyang's support in the war in Ukraine, particularly with respect to ammunition. But equally, it's a message to China that Russia has options, because one of the big things that's happened since Putin's invasion of Ukraine is that in many ways Russia's become the junior partner in the China-Russia relationship. And I think this is a very uncomfortable place for Russia to be occupying.
Uncomfortable also when it comes to Washington and its allies. We know that they've really been trying to deal with the situation in Ukraine. They've been trying to also rein in China's chip ambitions. They're dealing with a lot on their plate. How will they collaborate with allies across Asia in order to push back against this?
Well, look, there's the sanctions regime, and I think that's pretty much in place. Probably can't do much more than that. But I think the key thing here is for the West not to assume that we have some sort of axis of authoritarian states or axis of autocracies. I call this the Chasha illusion. Anxiety, rather. China and Russia creating anxiety in the West that there's a bloc lined up against them. Sure, both Russia and China have shared ambitions and objectives to recast the international order. Sure, they both have difficult relations with the United States, but their interests are quite fundamentally different. And I think a key part of this will be how well the United States can keep engaging with China and to provide alternatives to China and Russia.